Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you everybody for being here. I'd also like to thank my colleagues Kathleen Gilrean, Audrey Irving, and Rachel Steinberg for their support. I wish that we could all be in person roaming around the studios, but while that is still not a possibility, I'm thrilled that we're able to all gather virtually to see some of the work of our incredible studio artists. We have 6 artists presenting this evening in the following order: Ezra Wube, Doménica García, Catalina Ouyang, Patricia Encarnación, Chun, and Brian Hudson Huang. Each artist will present for 5 minutes, followed by 5 minutes of questions and answers. If you have a question for one of the artists, please write it in the chat and I will read them in the order they are received. Okay. And artist, just a reminder, please instruct me to say next slide, and I will also give you a 1 minute warning. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes. You can hear me, right?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear
you. Hi, everyone. How are you? Hi, everyone. How are you? My name is Ezra Wube. I'm a mixed media artist. I'm initially trained as a painter. Eventually became really interested in video with this expanded practice, incorporating sound and time. I became also very interested in it's a material as a medium, being a material, which I became interested in animation. So sort of a bridging between painting and video. Next slide, please. My work is especially my transformation from painting to animation, really influenced by my own autobiography, like moving from Ethiopia to United States. Kind of animation or video became a medium to negotiate this two sense of here and there, past and present, in a way to, so I strive to sort of activate my past and also engage with my present. So it's really important sort of kind of connecting this two bridges. So this is one of the first work you see on top. It's, well, I would say sort of my turning points from painting to animation, where I was painting on my studio window glass and just documenting the picture and making animation of it. So that sort of kind of became the gave me kind of the structure for my work to come ahead. After this piece, I abandoned painting and just fully became doing a time-based painting. And then this is what the one on the bottom is the most recent one. I'm obviously expanding from painting into more like sculpture, and sort of creating this world from past and present. But it's kind of interesting having that kind of vantage point to be able to document a three-dimensional object. Next, please. My other project really interested from one of the other projects I'm really interested in relatability. I feel like it's a way to relate to the here and now. So I do work in some of my projects with community, collaboration with community. The top work was done with the community project for over a 2 months period. We're kind of constructing a portrait of a neighborhood from people's knowledge. So it was open for any community to change location, to change scene, and to suggest idea, sort of creating this like a knowledge sharing space. So it's a stop motion animation, using kind of markets like materials. And the one on the second, and a similar motif of relatability, where people were constructing a painting along with me for a couple of months, again, sort of gallery/studio space setting. And I think it's really interesting to have that connection. Not only it's much more relief to it. You go to a studio to decide, but when you engage community or other people in the creative process, there is a chance for other conversation to happen. It also creates a relatability to what people know or the knowledge they have about the specific neighborhood. Next slide, please. And from that also, it's sort of like relates with the idea of relatability, but like more site specific. Again, there's something like kind of euphoric about like doing work about a specific place and then sort of just playing out the place, kind of connecting this idea and like the architecture of the space. And then most of my animation is like I use the structure of a building, like where I staple or I attach to the structure of the building or like work on it. So I really think about like space and place. Also its experience, how it affects to the artwork. Okay, that's all for now, and I'm just gonna share with you my excerpt of my animation. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Ezra.
Thanks very much.
All right, Doménica, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, great.
Hello, everyone. My name is Doménica García. I am a multimedia artist originally from Ecuador. So essentially, my work explores kind of the personal and the universal. So essentially by kind of juxtaposing.
Oh, wait, sorry. We're doing,
Q&A?
yeah.
Okay, no worries.
Q&A, sorry. Back up. So yeah, do we have questions for Ezra?
Becky, can you stop sharing screen so we can see Ezra?
Sorry. Oh, Rachel, sorry. Rachel Steinberg asks, can you talk more about your relationship to signage and ephemera?
Signage and ephemera. What do you mean by like signage? Like signage from like a street signage, or is it like a semiotic of like a language?
I think maybe both. It seems like there's a lot of language that appears in your work, and also a lot of the street signs and advertisements. Yeah, just wondering if you could talk more about that.
I guess, yeah. I mean, if right, it just kind of you try to express interpret like a place, right? And then you probably like think about like specific like iconography, but I don't think I think of iconography or something like that. But it's more I don't know, just it's quite an intuitive process, and why I select some images and kind of compose them together. So yeah, I don't know if I have anything specific like personal selection for like a specific signage, but as ephemeral, it really like I think it's like as video like became really interested to me because of its one, its immaterial quality, also it's experiential. So you experience it. So there's this kind of in a process of it. There's an urge like to create a scene, and there's also urge to change it. There's something really relieving about it, that like experiencing it So most of, I mean, my work are usually kind of realized at the spot. I don't really do much production after work. Kind of realizing it, kind of realizing this painting, this moment, and then just kind of changing it. So in that sense, I think of the ephemerality. Yeah, it's also just I feel like there's so much potential being ephemeral. And then rather than like when I did painting, when I looked at a painting or something like that from the past, it felt more like I don't know, like a monument or a grave, or like, I'm looking at a documentation of something I did, of like a past life. And that really became sort of frustrating to me. But the ephemeral aspect is sort of, it's changing, and it's there, and it's not there. It's I find it more honest to life in a way, personally. I hope that answered your question.
I need more aspirin. Aspirin.
Rachel Beach, do you want to ask your question?
Well, my question was actually answered, so that's fine. But I was curious, just in hearing you talk, it was struck me when you said painting is like death, whereas something ephemeral. So sometimes things that are ephemeral are more closely associated with death. Things that come, things that go. There's my dog. Anyway, what about that? What do you think about that?
I think it's like, I mean, everything changed, right? Like it's almost impossible. There's nothing that doesn't change. It could be like a slow or fast, or it could take millions of years. Or it could take like a few seconds. So like things always change. So I think I was initially attracted to painting because of it defies time and place. It kind of has that it's just this frozen moment. It's that defiance of life. I thought was very interesting first. But as an ephemeral being, like death, it's I feel like they're more truths rather than like death, because obviously like eternity also sounds like this. I mean, it sounds kind of more dust to me, because like something endlessly stuck to something. It sounds like terrifying. I don't know, but yeah, it's I guess like ephemerality is like it's it comes and goes. But there's a sentiment to life or something like that. But there's also a chance for the new possibilities. There's also like a loss of burden to keep something the same, which is like, I find it like there's possibly like a sense of freedom that comes from that, not be able to confirm to like this eternity of time and place. So yeah, it's definitely there's a celebration of like ephemerality. Definitely has a nature of celebration. Also has a nature of realizing like the big picture. But again, that's personally for me. But other artists could look at it different ways. But for me, it became no longer interesting for me to sort of define time and place when I was doing painting, which I thought was interesting first to kind of define it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ezra.
Sure. Yeah,
okay, we are going to move on to Doménica. Sorry, again.
Hey, Gabriel.
Okay. All right.
Cool. So hello again, everyone. My name is Doménica. I'm one of the studio artists. As I mentioned before, I am a multimedia artist. I'm originally from Ecuador. So essentially my work really revolves around the ordinary. I like to kind of juxtapose that with just the radical in order to give more relevance to the day-to-day experience. Usually my work is pretty much performance art and video work. And so I kind of work with these together. And the purpose of that is essentially to kind of manipulate reality and to sort of present a fantastical and kind of surreal experience that sort of exists within the rational world. So yeah, Becky, we can play the video and maybe lower level of sound. Yeah, that should be good. Great, so these are just like a few clips of my projects. This is from Fragmentación, which is essentially a video performance piece about female sexuality. It's divided in different video pieces and it sort of all links together. Ceviche revolves around the making of shrimp ceviche and touches upon the unseen labor of women. The clips that you are seeing now were part of some movement-based performance I was working on. And at the moment I was interested in exploring geometric iridescent shapes. So I was building these props and moving around them. And lastly, the last video is from Corazón Entristecido, which also started as a performance piece that revolves around the action of making coffee. And it's inspired in a traditional Ecuadorian song. So it essentially, yeah, touches upon, it kind of compares a heartbreak with political disappointment. So good, okay. Cool, so yeah, so next slide. So we can stay in this slide. Cool, so my work in the past months has changed quite a lot. Particularly due to the pandemic. So the nature of my work, my video work particularly, I have a background in filmmaking. So a lot of the work I do does have a very cinematic feel. I do work with like my props and I create the spaces. So it involves a lot of collaboration. So just due to the pandemic, it has been something I haven't been pretty much doing for the past year. And it's pretty similar with my performance work as well. Since what I find really interesting about performance, it's the capacity that it has to kind of just exist and blur the line within just like what it is art and reality. So I find that really hard to do through just like a virtual space. So my work has shifted to more of an abstract work. I've been still working with movement, but I've been trying to develop just my interest right now in just like kind of abstract shapes and the idea of shapelessness. And I think part of the pandemic has also inspired the molecular and cellular aesthetic of these paintings that I've been doing. So next slide. Thank you, Becky. Yeah, and so from this work and connecting all of this with performance, I've been really just interested in the idea of like the body and how the body tends to be categorized and defined. And in some ways we exist in a structure and in a world that pretty much revolves around that. So I've been finding very interesting how the idea of shapelessness and abstraction can be in some ways a act of resistance to the structures that we already have. So from these paintings, I kind of want to translate that into some of the set and video work I've been doing in the past and kind of creating actual spaces. So yeah, I've been very interested in that pretty much. So at the moment, I am also currently working on developing these pieces and I want the pieces to be interactive. I want to be able to move in them and hopefully I'll have other people do the same, but really kind of seeing the work through that lens. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome, thank you. Do people have questions for Doménica? Just a reminder, please put your question in the chat and I will you can either write question or write your question. Audrey.
Hi, I'm wondering, just kind of in general, what is inspiring you right now and sort of what's going on in your practice that we maybe haven't covered so far?
I mean, overall, I think it's pretty much what essentially inspires me is just the things that are happening every day. And so for me, I think right now, just the whole pandemic has been a huge thing in my mind. Just, it has been a very just like body and sensation oriented year in general. So overall, that is essentially what is inspiring me at the moment. I've been very interested in just rest, again, kind of linking that with kind of rest as an act of resistance, and yeah, all the time to be home.
Cool. Brian also asks, can you talk more about body and performance?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's kind of, it depends. When I work with body, it's my body. So that is a type of way that I've kind of explored performance. And so I was working a lot with like the relationship I personally have with my body through objects and through space. However, I think this can also change because I do think that the idea of performance itself is not necessarily linked to myself. And so I think part of like also my interest in objects, it's that perhaps like the exploration that can happen in a space or with an object, it doesn't necessarily need to be individual. So even like other people interacting with things, that is also in itself a performance, if that makes sense.
I have a question. Are these new abstractions that you're working with abstractions of the body itself, or is just what exactly how you is related to your performance and your body exploration? These abstractions.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess in some ways it is part of like my own body exploration, but I think also like the paintings and the drawings are mostly what I do envision them to be and to become eventually are actual spaces. So I want to have them as a space to actually explore with my body and to maybe just like lay down on them to rest. Or I've been also very interested in like somatic movement and therapeutic movement. And I was very interested in like acupressure. So how you're using props and objects to, in some ways, activate and create sensations in the physical body. And so kind of using spaces as a means to kind of discover yourself in some way. Mm-hmm.
Are they in any way schematic?
What do you mean?
Brian, do you want to clarify your question?
Sure. I think when you said you wanted them to eventually be real spaces, and I was thinking like, do they have any kind of connection to, say, a floor plan, or are they a form of a floor plan or a schematic or a map of sorts? Just, yeah, that's basically what I mean.
Not really. I think they will become like, I mean, they are going to be like a 3D situation. I mean, I think like the best example of like what I can think of, it's pretty much like props. And I am also, again, I'm very involved in like the movement world. And if you've ever taken a yoga class, there's always like bolsters, there's pillows, blocks. And so in some ways, I'm also interested in like how these things can aid and support the body. So I'm interested in creating that sort of space for that. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Doménica.
Little playground. You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Catalina.
Hello. Okay, I wonder if I can get my videos spotlit. I'm still seeing you, Becky. Well, okay, I'll just go from here. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Catalina Ouyang. My practice spans object making, installation, video, performance, and more conceptual relational projects. to kind of navigate between trauma, dissidence, and self-identification. My work draws holistically from a range of sources, from literature, history, mythology, and folklore, to kind of work through this stuff. A lot of the work begins from the body or the figure and either expands or fragments it, kind of proposing the body as a politicized landscape subject to partition. I'm really interested in what kinds of discourses and histories are inscribed on the body, and how it exists in contingency with architecture. So I'm just going to go through a couple of pieces from 2 solo exhibitions that I've put up since starting residency at SMAC Mellon. This is an install shot. Oh, sorry, the previous image was an install shot from my an exhibition titled The Siren. That's in Hartford, Connecticut. And this is an install shot from an exhibition that went up at Wiles and King in Manhattan last fall. Oh, Becky, sorry, I'll tell you when to advance, actually. And so,
is there sound? I think I'm getting some comments that it's hard to hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I was running errands and did not get a chance to make it all the way home. So I'm taking refuge where I can. So sorry, Becky, can you actually go back a couple slides and I'll just tell you when to advance. Okay. Right, so this exhibition is titled Can't Fly Through. And it was actually installed in an outdoor space. And it involved sculptural installation, wall-mounted sculptures, and a conceptual project. Next, please. So this is a shot of one piece in the show in Hartford. It's titled Reliquary Corpus, and it's hung about, like 14-ish feet up. And I was kind of inspired by seeing kind of bodies of Christ hung up high in like Catholic altars. Next, please. And so I was like really kind of thinking about like a Catholic reliquary, a kind of like container that's meant to hold part of a body of a saint. And in this case, the body part of the saint is transposed by a book that has its spine turned away from the audience, that has its identity kind of negated. And also inside of the chamber is a kind of more speculative bodily surface that is lit from within. The head of the corpus is built up around the skull of a gray wolf. And I'm thinking through various connotations of the wolf, from a reference to the founding myth of Rome, to how the wolf is activated in the fairy retellings of Angela Carter, for instance, as a kind of nexus point of femininity, gender, and sexual violence. Next, please. And this piece is titled Devotion, and very succinctly, it features a portrait of myself as a child sitting at a school desk, regarding a wall of drawings I made in 2016 that are photorealistic renderings of selfies that my ex-partner had sent me of himself looking sad after he raped me. Next, please. And that is a detailed shot of the figure itself, which in my practice tend to be made up of varying materials, from wood, epoxy clay, plaster, and found or organic materials. Next, please. So this work was part of the show Cut Waifu at Wiles and King. This is titled Untitled Partition. And the main structure is made up of reassembled bunk bed parts that I got from a military surplus in Buffalo, New York. And essentially at the time I was thinking and reading a lot about Angel Island, which was a detention center for Chinese immigrants during the Chinese exclusion act. Sorry about that.
1 minute.
Next, please. And the structure of the bunk bed basically becomes a stage setting or theater for a series of fragmented body parts. This is like a reoccurring figure in my work that is kind of a humanoid Shiva. Next, please. And this was another central sculptural installation in my Wiles and King show that charts a number of references ranging from Chinese myths about hell to British propaganda in early colonization of India, to Gustave Courbet's painting, The Origin of the World. But really, I wanted to create a kind of affective scene with like a really concentrated action taking place and leave that kind of open. Next, please. This is the last one. Okay.
All right, thank you, Catalina. Questions for Catalina? I am curious about your relationship between like sculpture and narrative, because sculpture is such a still object and these feel really performative.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I like about like objects or sculpture is that they're essentially perpetually happening like in medias res, right? So the kind of like action or like performance is actually like activated by then like the viewer's movement around or through the objects that are present. I actually don't think that much about, let's say, like theater. I think what draws me to figuration is that it is direct, and there's something like primal about that very quick kind of like recognition, right? And I think it's like almost like a shortcut to some kind of like affective sponge to try to get somewhere like really quickly. So, in like other works, like prior to this, I have, works more directly with like performance or video that are like discretely time-based. But I feel like sculpture, I mean, all art is like time-based, right? Because like you're taking it in an embodied way. But yeah, I think a lot about both like the orientation of the figures that I'm creating and also like the orientation, like proprioceptive movement of like the viewer through the space that I'm curating, essentially.
Great, thank you. Have any other questions? Okay, thanks, Carolina. Oh wait, Gabriel asks, can you talk more about the position of the viewer in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I was just like thinking today or talking today during the studio visit about how, like, for me, the idea of like trying to like preempt or predict, right? Like what a viewer will do or like what a viewer will experience is like separate but adjacent to like a concept of like what the work is doing, or what the work is inviting. So like I try my best not to try to like predict like what on an individual level is going to be like gleaned from like interacting with my work, but rather, you know, I think like installation of any body of work is always like a kind of really kind of like repetitive or like tedious process for me, because like I have to really inhabit a space and like move through it myself to kind of understand like what my relationship to these different like orientations or like spatial interruptions are, and then hope some of that sort of like perceptual activity will translate perhaps in a transformed way to, you know, other viewers.
Okay, great. Thanks, Carolina. Thanks, Gabriel, for your question. Patricia, are you ready?
We are. Hello, everyone. My name is Patricia Encarnación. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's Mellon for putting this together as well. I'm gonna start my presentation with this short version video that I did for the Museum of Latin American Art, where I explain my work and introduce myself a little bit as well. Please, I'll play it. This is Patricia Encarnación, an Afro-Caribbean chi-hair artist currently living in the Bronx, New York City, and I will be sharing 2 of my series, El Negro Detrás de la Oreja and I Am from Urdu Vacation. Thank you, Becky. This is Patricia. Can you pass to the next? Thank you. So a little bit of my work is I utilized quotidian artifacts, objects, and landscape from the Caribbean, specifically Dominican Republic. That's where I'm from. And I'm going to present a little bit of my how I continue in these projects that I've been working on throughout my professional and artistic development. And how and where do I have them now in my residency in Mellon? The first project I'm going to be introducing will be this Negro Detrás de la Oreja, and then which translate as the black behind the ear. But then I'm revisiting this project as under the umbrella and the question of, is our blackness behind the ear actually? Please go to the next. Something that I'm trying to portray in this series of photography, ceramics, and composition is how the Dominicans can be reimagined through an anti-colonialist lens. In this image, we can see how this is like a porcelain piece of an avocado, and using like aesthetics of altars that I grew up seeing my grandmother put it together, and elements of resistance. I create these new compositions with these objects that I'm working with. Next, please. So here we can see like as I utilize the same objects, the ceramic, in this case, the avocado, in 2 different stages, just showcasing a little bit of my experimentation and revisiting what is the new, like how I imagine Dominicanness in this new sphere. Can you go to the next one, please? So here, this is another of the ceramic pieces where I cast the bottle of rum from the Dominican Republic, and I do these exercises of photography, utilizing like landscapes and different patterns to see how I can like reorient this discourse of anti-colonialism and how can I, through that lens, talk about Dominicanness. Next, please. So something that is really particular in this project is the patterns that are utilized. And then I'm in this process of this, in the stage of the project, I'm analyzing how would be more convenient to use these patterns, just like as something that wrapped the element itself, or something that is just like a part of the rhetoric in the background of Dominican history. Next, please. So this next project that I'm going to talk about is Massacre. Can you play it in quiet, please? Okay. So Massacre is actually a river, but it's also a historical moment that happened in the Dominican Republic between Haiti and Dominican Republic, where Trujillo sent to kill in 1937 every single Haitian that officials will see, and then it's an estimation of like 30,000 deaths throughout that period of like only 4 months in this year. So I go to the next slide, please. So I've been exploring, going and revisiting the frontier, where I take photos of the landscape and see how, like, even though those histories and those moments have been happening in those spaces, the Caribbean, the landscape itself has not been morphed or haven't been disrupted by these horrible events. And while at the same time proposing like how we can revisit this history and like through healing and do like a healing process of like how move on with this you know, terrible events. Next, please. So the next project I'm going to talk is that I'm working on is Abiyayala. It's a Guna language word, where is this the indigenous movement in South America utilized to claim back the land and the continent of the Americas in general. And then by renaming it Abiyayala, they try to get back the ownership of this land that was taken through colonization. Next, please. So this is like a series of digital collages where I utilize like tropical and landscapes aesthetics, and through using similar elements, I try to create like a narrative of how Abiyayala can be reborn and can be owned by their owners, since can be owned by the native of this land that was taken from them. Next. So I want to conclude with you with this phrase from Anthony Burgess, which you guys will probably know him from the Word Clock Orange movie, where he says, colonialism, the enforced express of the rule of reason, but who is going to spread it among the colonizers? And my answer to Anthony is, well, here we are, the artists, trying to claim back and bring awareness to what colonialism has done to the Americas. Well, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Patricia. Who do we have questions? Patricia. Your work, the imagery especially, seems to have a dialogue with advertising imagery. Can you talk about whether you're using that type of imagery as a strategy in your work? This is from Gabriel de Guzman.
Thank you, Gary, for the question. So definitely that aesthetic is a big part of what I'm trying to incorporate in my work, because I play around a lot with the idea of the Caribbean as a paradise and the exotification that has been put upon the Caribbean from the global north to the region. And I do try to, in many of my projects, to incorporate that typical getaway advertisement, and like by applying it in these like in surreal forms, or just like in these you know, moments of overlapping it with like with bodies, with quotidian elements of the Caribbean, I tried to critique that exotification that is always being put upon the Caribbean and the Atlantic work in general. How about answer the question?
Sorry, I was muted. I'm wondering if you, Rachel says, I'm wondering if you think about speculative fiction at all in your work.
Speculative fiction. I'm not familiar with the term necessarily. As like you meaning.
Rachel, do you want to
a bit on that, please?
Yeah, I was just curious. Like speculative fiction is kind of like, you know, science fiction, fantasy, Afrofuturism, like different ways of kind of like you mentioned, you know, rethinking certain histories and imagining different futures for them. And so I was just wondering if that, you know, those types of narratives ever come up in your work.
Yeah, no, definitely. I work a lot with that, with creating these landscapes within the Caribbean aesthetics, but that has like this surreal element to it. Because the thing is that the Caribbean, it happens a lot that depending your social class, your skin color, or if you're a foreign or a local, you can really have different like polarized experiences. So that's like something that I definitely try to incorporate in my work. For instance, as we can see, thank you, Becky, for these slides. In the right one, like it is a landscape that you can be familiar with, but the way I try to overlap the elements, the figure, the body, is in a surreal form that it is like, you know, like it's showcasing this beautiful landscape, but you can still see this person like suffocating or being trapped within these spaces, right? So definitely that's like that's something that I portray, and like it's a technique that I use a lot in order to create my narrative and my discourse. Yeah.
Thanks, Patricia. Okay, we have to move on. Thank you, Gabriel and Rachel, for your questions. Thank you, Patricia, for sharing. Jesse, are you ready?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Jesse Chun. This first image is not a piece of work that I made, but it's the page of a book that I've been using a lot throughout my work. It's a best-selling English as a second language, English as a foreign language book called Word Power Made Easy. And I wanted to share this image because I think this book, the title of this book actually really captures a lot of what my work is thinking about, which is thinking about these relations between language, power, and bureaucracy, and thinking about how they relate to construct one's legibility or agency. And I like to work with found objects and found documents to think of ways of retranslating them and possibly thinking of new poetics that can merge from them. Next, please. And here's another source document that I often work with, which is my own immigration document from the US government. And on the right is another piece of document from the government that is from the 70s. Next, please. As you can see in this installation image, I work across various media, spanning sculpture, video, sound, drawing, and installation, and artist publications. I'm really interested in thinking about also the material translation of language and thinking about how we navigate language, not just as the written or the spoken, but also thinking about our relationship to navigate it physically and in other relations. Next, please. This is a recent video sculpture that I showed last year, and it's titled Indexing My Monologue. In this work, I was looking at various documents and indexes of the English language and how it was institutionalized in the United States. And there were a lot of moments where, this language, the world's most dominant language, how it really was entangled with moments of bureaucracy and immigration history. So I was really interested in working with these found pages and constructing my own visual poem or video poem using this kind of indexical gesture. Next, please. Another thing I've been doing a lot is working with abstraction and redaction and erasure as my methodology to think of new poetics from these found documents. And this iteration is called Translations on Evidence, Untranslatable Futures, and Other Drawings. In this work, I was looking at the visual language of bureaucracy, looking at the watermarks and these other structures and visual elements that exist to render one as a legible subject. So I've been using abstraction to retranslate that into abstractions. And in that process, I'm removing or kind of decontextualizing them from their original function or power. And I am also interested in activating the relations of these objects through this kind of erasure drawing that I do on the wall. The graphite drawing on the wall that's in between the two objects, that is actually drawn by my hand rubbing graphite into the wall. So in a strange way, it becomes almost like a portrait of illegible fingerprints, or, depending on how I recontextualize it in the title, sometimes it becomes illegible book page, but it always is in relation to the other objects next to them. Next, please. And here's a close-up of another abstraction that is a material translation of that. And next, please. And this is a series of sculptures titled Enunciating Silence and again, it's looking at this kind of in-between space between language and form, using the English language as a point of departure. Next, please. And this is the most recent drawing called Score for Unlanguaging. Again, looking at the relationship between language and bureaucracy and thinking of ways to abstract it further away from its meaning to consider new meanings and new potentials. But that's it.
Great, thanks, Jessie. Do we have questions for Jessie? Rachel Tang asks, what is the role of pedagogy in your work?
I'm really interested in playing with the language of pedagogy in my work, actually, particularly about the English language, because I think that there's such a way in which language has been institutionalized, and the language that you use to teach a language that is the world's most dominant language, I think there are a lot of layers of ideologies embedded in them. So I'm really interested in kind of unpacking that pedagogical language, which in the case of the English language is, it holds a lot of legacies of imperialism. So like pedagogy is something I definitely think about in terms of how, power is institutionalized or legibility is institutionalized.
Awesome, thanks. S. McCaffrey asks, thank you for that wonderful presentation. At a time when we're reckoning with racism and other entrenched systemic oppressions, there's heightened awareness of the language we use and new accountability. How do you think of language and unlanguaging within the current language climate?
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for your super thoughtful question. I think of, so unlanguaging is a term I kind of recently made up, and simply because there were no words to describe the process that my work is doing, which is a lot of like undoing of these systems and kind of trying to think of ways to break free from that and to think of other positions or other meaning. And so I think in terms of languaging and unlanguaging at this time, I think that the same way, like we're all talking about trying to hopefully unlearn a lot of this, systemic shit, honestly, that's going on. I think a lot of it is also kind of, a process for yourself. And at least for me, speaking for myself, I think it's something I'm trying to do for myself and trying to unlearn so that I can also kind of, you know, heal and learn from that, and to kind of go on to the next, hopefully, you know, phase of languaging. So yeah, I think it's something I think of in context of like unlearning, and yeah, hopefully leading to that kind of place of healing. Yeah.
Rachel asks, can you talk more about how you go about working with different materials?
Yeah, in terms of like my source materials, you know, they all range from various documents. So there's a sense of, you know, I think this kind of institutionalized document or knowledge or legibility. And then from there it goes to various media and various materialities. And so from there, I think, you know, they kind of take on their own physicality and their own meaning. So that kind of material translation is actually really important in how I reinterpret the documents. And so, yeah, the material translation is something I think about a lot. And a lot of the materials I use range from like, you know, graphite to silicone to, you know, aluminum. So yeah, I think it really ranges in how the work takes its own route. I hope that makes sense.
Great, thank you, Jessie. And last not but least, we'll have Brian Hudson Huang.
Thanks, Becky. Is my sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian. I am a video artist. My work deals a lot with photography and moving images and the role of artists as image makers. So this first image is a still from a video I made about vernacular photography. I sent out around 13 disposable cameras to old classmates around the United States, some of whom I know and some of whom I do not, and asked them to document their life for 1 to 2 weeks. I then took this material and made an essay film that weaved my personal experiences from the time we were all students with this sort of fictional narrative of two people sending photographs to each other through the mail. Next slide. So I was exploring this idea of indexing in photography, both in the physical sense and the visual cultural sense. From the late 19th to early 20th century, photography was considered to have an indexical function, which is that the image captures a truthful representation of the moment that was photographed. While this idea is certainly challenged now in contemporary thought, I still feel that it is a commonly accepted idea among laypersons, and that vernacular photography relies on this notion to function as an object of evidence or object that elicit memories or nostalgia from someone. Next slide. Yeah, and can you play the video? Great. The second idea of indexing pertains to the physical process of indexing, which I'm defining as a process where information is being recorded in a systematic and regular manner. This is essentially how the photographic image is made. Light travels through the aperture of a camera and is captured by the silver highlight crystals of the film negative. Next slide. So when this negative is developed, in the case of color photography, the silver is washed away and color dyes take their place. Then this negative is taken to produce a positive of the image. So the photographic process is a process of mirroring, yet the actual physical materials of the image are transformed within that act of mirroring. And this sort of culminates in this process where index information that can only be accessed through another process of interpretation. And so photography as a material and photography as a function of visual culture sort of parallel each other. Next slide. After making the first video, I wanted to incorporate more social historical elements into my work. So I made this video as a continuation of this train of thought on images sort of mirroring and refracting. So this is a photograph of Tsar Nicholas II, the last monarch of Russia before the Russian Revolution. And I essentially did this process where I was able to like paste it on a transparent piece of plexiglass. Next slide. And I started trying to visually weave this kind of speculative history, or also I would say it's a speculative conspiracy theory, surrounding sort of like the last Russian monarch and like Russian suprematist painting, along with next slide, please. This image of Chiang Kai-shek, who is a 20th century politician that fought against the Chinese Communist Party during the Chinese Civil War, and was also backed by the US government as a tool to stave off communism in the so-called Second World. And then I folded this narrative into the narrative of CIA-sponsored art exhibitions of American abstract expressionist painting that traveled through the world during this time as another tool of staving off communism. So sort of this war was fought both physically and culturally on two fronts. In this kind of speculative history, which by no means I'm proclaiming as true, becomes connected, sort of like a rhizome or a constellation, and the images begin to flatten like the layers of a foremost painting, or even perhaps layers of a photographic film. Next slide. Can you play the video? Great. So this is what I'm currently working on, which is an attempt to sort of consolidate all these ideas I'm working through in the previous work. I took archived footage of the Tiananmen Square protests, specifically the footage of the widely circulated incident where an unidentified civilian got on top of a tank, and made a point cloud model from the extracted video frames. I put it through this program that is used in archaeological and architectural surveys, and it basically takes photos of a survey site and attempts to create a 3D model of the site by comparing the photographs and calculating the distance between objects in the photograph. In this sense, it's sort of another form of analyzing the index information of photographs. However, in this instance, it is incapable of correctly analyzing the information, and instead it sort of creates this exploded or disintegrated image. And what was important for me was sort of trying to get back at this idea where indexed information, while integral to the process of photography, or rather the translation of index information is integral to the process of photography. Sometimes even in advanced technologies, it somehow actually ends up disintegrating the image or making the image even more obfuscated or something, or more unclear. Yeah, that's basically what I've been working on. And thank you, Becky.
Awesome, thanks, Brian. Questions, Brian? Juan says, amazing.
Thanks, Juan.
I'm curious, like, where you even begin.
In what way?
Just like any I don't know. I mean, these ideas seem so like nuanced or something.
You know what? I think it's because. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Becky.
Yeah, just like where do you start conceptually?
I think it's because in many I was thinking about the role of artists as image makers, and so I was trying to understand what exactly are we all doing, and therefore it's sort of trying to maybe unravel the genealogy of visual culture through personal history. And I think all artists are in some way doing something like that. It's just that I so happen to do it this way. I hope that makes sense.
Cool. Kathleen has a question. Kathleen, do you want to unmute yourself? Oops.
Sorry. Yeah, really interesting, Brian. Thank you. I was just wondering, do you think about surveillance today in relationship to any of your work and your work with photography and sort of the, you know, the history of photography and, you know, political world and in relationship to surveillance today and within governments?
I'm under the assumption that we're always being surveilled, and I kind of unfortunately accepted the idea that if the government wants information from us, they can just get it. So I have a really cynical view of surveillance. So I'm no longer maybe not no longer, but I maybe am not interested in trying to explore that dynamic because it's sort of already ingrained in me. Yeah, but also I do understand sort of the role of perhaps voyeurism in surveillance and the relationship to that to photography, specifically to the gaze. So I haven't really maybe fully fleshed out my thoughts on that, but it does seem like something fruitful to look into, I guess. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. Rachel asks, can you talk more about the disintegration of images in relation to the construction of truth?
I think for me, when images are being disintegrated, it's really more of a gesture or an action than, say, allowing an image to naturally disintegrate. So obviously there is a kind of way where I'm trying to parallel these two ideas, where the disintegration of images is related to the disintegration of truth, but I don't necessarily think that those two are inherently related in like a maybe ontological sense. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Becky.
Okay. So that was everybody.
I was going to add a question.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Rachel.
Right, I was just typing it up, but I was going too slow. I was wondering your thoughts about sort of a backward-looking idea about image making. You use some historical imagery, and you use the word genealogy, which has a sort of like a backward tracking of things versus some of the tech that you're currently using has more of a forward-looking idea about image creation, and just what your thoughts are on the intersection of those things. Or, I mean, obviously they're on a trajectory and they're connected, but I'm just wondering your thoughts.
Okay. Oh boy, I didn't want to be that person to quote Foucault, but I'm using genealogy in the Foucauldian sense, where history isn't like a successive linear where we're building upon it. Rather, we should be looking at history as what exactly were the circumstances that caused these events to happen. Deleuze. No, I'm not going to talk about Deleuze. So in that sense, when I think about the technology of photography, I don't even I'm not putting the beginning point at the invention of photography, but actually at like the Renaissance, where sort of perspective and like first person point of view and foreground and background were I want to say made, but maybe like conceptualized in contemporary art making or something. So I think that's what I mean by genealogy, and I think like the current my current use of technology, or rather the technology that I am using is still based off of that kind of way of thinking from the Renaissance. It just happens that we're getting closer and closer to I'm not gonna say perfecting it, but we're getting closer to it. But it's sort of unreachable. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Becky.
Okay, so we can stick around for a couple more minutes, but I just want to make sure to say thank you again, really, Brian and Catalina and Ezra and Jesse and Patricia, Doménica. You guys are awesome. I'm so fortunate to know you and get to know your work. Thank you so much for sharing it with me and the rest of the community, and thanks again to all of my colleagues, and to all the audience for your questions. We appreciate you being here and showing your support, and hopefully we can see each other in person soon, maybe. All right. If anyone has any questions for any of the other artists, well, we can stick around for a few minutes. But.
I did have a question. I guess I wanted to say to everyone, like what sort of crossovers and connections they've found with the ways the other artists are thinking inside of the program. Like, has there been any interesting revelations betwixt y'all for everyone? But specifically for, no, I'm just gonna, sorry, please, whoever. Gabriel's laughing, Dominica's laughing. Okay, good. I'll throw this out to Doménica. What do you got?
I would say in my particular experience so far, because of the COVID whole situation, I haven't had the opportunity to be like physical presence with the rest of the residency, but like throughout the presentations that we have done together and listening others like friends, it's like, to me, like Brian approach of images and like construction of, it's almost like a historiographic process to it that is something that I would use a lot in my work, and hearing him in today's presentation and past presentation, it has like made me think about, you know, like the importance of not only historically, but like but also as like aesthetic and visually, how I can approach better like how I see and create images. And also Jean's approach and curiosity to languages, specifically me as a bilingual person, that's like hearing her talk about you know, the importance and the predominance that languages can have in our everything that we do, and like, and how we normally take these like our, I know, like the language as like a vocabulary, like as words, but also as and then translated to images. It's like it's a big process from a lot of artists as well. So I feel that also have helped me to look into that, you know, like the processes of language, me having my ideas in two languages as well, and then like my process of like how I navigate, you know, here in the diaspora, and then also in my motherland, Dominican Republic, through language, and then how I translate that to also my images. So I would say like those are two big parts I've been able to take from being part of the program.
Thanks, Patricia. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I feel like also Jesse's, Jesse and like, I feel like there's like the idea, like Oh, Jesse, is that your dog? So cute. Yeah, like I feel like the way that abstraction is being used is really, it was really interesting. Like I feel like yeah, just the like abstraction being used as a way of kind of like questioning truthiness or something is really fascinating. That's something I kind of I see in a lot of your work, especially with Jesse and Brian. I think that there's like some interesting crossover there, and then also Doménica and the way that you're kind of the way that you are moving into painting and more kind of abstract form, as you said, formlessness. Yeah, I don't know. I hope that you're having some good conversations around that, but I definitely see some interesting connections.
I mean, if I can say something, I mean, I find very interesting in general, like the work of everyone. But I think like, I mean, I personally have more of a background in video. And so for me, I think like a big takeaway has been just like the work in parts of like Catalina, also Jesse and Patricia with like the use of just like materials. I find really intriguing just to see all of these different things. I mean, in Catalina's work, it's very like visual and like impactful and just like the textures of it. But I think like Jesse's work has also, with like the silicone, it's also very interesting visually to me. And the same thing with Patricia's work. So I find that really interesting. And with Patricia's work, I really like the idea of like redefining and recreating and imagining. So I also find that concept that you're working with and with like Dominicanness super really interesting.
Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna jump in. I am in another loud place, sorry. But you know, I've been kind of like a ghost or like a lurker in like the hallways of like the Mellon basement. And most of like what I've like witnessed of like other folks practice, because we're actually contractually forbidden from hanging out because of COVID. Like we have to like exit the hallway if someone else is there. But it's interesting to see like the imprint of like how space, like shared spaces are used. Like in the wood shop, I'm like, okay, like Patricia's been like using the sink, there's like plaster, or like Ezra has like thrown something in like the shop trash. And then I can just like imagine like fill in the blanks between like the traces, the physical traces that are left from like their work to like what I know of like the presentation. And then, yeah, I don't know. And like Doménica, like I hear you in studio and I like see your lights on, and Brian as well. And there's just like a kind of like differing level of like mess or like trace that is left, which is interesting. I feel like I leave a lot of mess. Like that's just like, yeah.
I was gonna say the same thing about feeling like a ghost in the studio. But also when I am alone, I also feel like the studios are haunted. And then then I asked the previous programs manager about her opinions on that, and she told me that she also thinks it's haunted, but in a more ecological sense, because the studios were built basically on artificial land, and sort of like she said, like the water is trying to like come back in, so like it's like the ghost of the or maybe it's the spirit of the water punishing us or something. But yeah, I totally know what you mean.
Wow, thank you guys for sharing that. I never thought of Mellon as having like its own hauntology, and this is a great new dimension to my work now.
I definitely get super spooked when I'm like, especially like if I'm shutting down and like it's night and then I'm in the that hallway is
There's like 0% chance it is not haunted. But I do like the idea that it's the water haunting. I always thought it was like some other type of specter, but if it's the water, that is a very interesting theory that I'm happy to entertain.
Yeah, I feel like the spirit of water is such a beautiful way of putting it, and that could be a really cool group show for you guys to think about as Mellon for the future cohort.
Yeah. I think it's more than haunted. Oh, Rachel says excited to lock up tonight. Yeah, have fun with that. Good luck. Just kidding. I don't think that they're bad ghosts. Bad spirits. Okay, well, I think we'll end here. But thank you everybody again for coming out, and thanks to all the studio artists for sharing our work with us. It was really great, really fun to have everyone together and to get to see your work again and hear you talk about it. So yeah, thanks so much.
Thank
all
you,
right,
everyone.
have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, Becky. Bye, everyone.
Good job. Bye, guys.